Management consultancy McKinsey has agreed to pay back various amounts to state-owned entities, including Eskom. Now, despite this, McKinsey executives have said they did real work for the entities. Just how much damage has been done here? And to discuss this issue now is Economist Dr. Iraj Abedian. He is with Pan-African Research, and he joins me now. Doc, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for making time to speak to us this Sunday afternoon. Firstly, I know you hold very strong views when it comes to the amounts that have been committed to be paid back by McKinsey. Let's talk about the most recent one, 650 million to be split, I think, between Transnet and there is another state-owned entity whose name escapes me now. But your thoughts on that? South African Airways. There we go.
Yeah. I think all it is it's really quite ridiculous for a company like McKinsey that prides itself to be management consulting, having cutting-edge information, IP, etc., having waited since November 2019, when their director went to the parliament and so-called disclose all this theft and embezzlement that they had enabled. Remember, they became the enabling agent using their global brand to siphon out billions out of all state-owned enterprises. At that time, David Fine, the director, said we're paying back Eskom 1.1 billion and had an attachment to his 16-page document. Now, 4 years later, they come and say, no, we forgot some 650 million more. This is like a thief breaking into your house and saying, I'll decide how much I've stolen, I decide what I'll pay back, and I'll decide how much damage you are entitled to. It's quite bizarre. They take us as a fool. So it is very, very sad. The damage that they've caused runs into tens of billions. They have enabled abuse and corruption, and they must come out open.
Yeah, Doc, we know how clear the US is when it comes to companies that do this kind of damage to any country, in particular that country. What measures, if any, has the US taken against McKinsey?
To the best of my knowledge, nothing, because it's not a listed entity in the US. The US fined $100 million SAP because of their corruption and enabling abuse in South Africa. McKinsey's got away in a way from the regulatory fine, but they have cases against them. At the latest one, 2 days ago, McKinsey came out apologizing because they enabled a pharmaceutical company to promote their addiction drugs amongst the youth and others. And that's fresh new, and I'm sure they will be fined for that, but it takes time. They have had other cases, not their current CEO, but about 15 years ago, their CEO got imprisoned because of this abuse. So McKinsey has got a long history of using its brand under the brand management advisory to do a mismanagement and do a lot of social harm, running into billions of dollars.
Doc, earlier in the week, we saw Transnet coming out to say, actually, we think we are entitled to about 1.2 billion if you are going to be paying back anything. As far as Eskom is concerned, you hold the view that that entity is owed at least 6 billion rand by McKinsey.
That's right.
Where do these figures come from? Make sense. Make sense of that for us.
It's very simple. We must get the contracts that they signed. The signature of their previous director, Mr. Sago, and others is on the contract. Remember, they've already paid back 1.1 billion. that whole contract was over 11 billion, because it was linked to very unusual. It was linked to supply of coal to Eskom. They were getting a fraction of it between them and Trillion. And the CFO and the CEO and the chairman of Eskom had authorized all of that. So they've already paid 1.1, but we don't know how much they've drawn. They say they've drawn 1.1. We need to see the contract. We need to see corroborated or audited independently how much they've stolen, how much regiment has stolen, and Trillion, how much the CFO has been paid. All of these we don't know. Just somebody comes out of London and says, no, we think we owe you 600 million. Or if tomorrow's under commission or another commission comes up with more evidence, suddenly McKinsey will volunteer, quotation mark, volunteer to pay more. This is not the way to deal with it. When this abuse and theft happens, it's very easy. You disclose all the list independently. We assess how much they've stolen. We assess since when, because it's been over a period of 5 or 6 years. Remember, there was a time that this sort of syndicate of McKinsey, Trillion, and some individuals who, they were all over like red rash over SAA, Eskom, Transnet, everything state-owned enterprise, they were there. And the similar type of technology, so-called, they were using. Their IP was very effective in stealing money. Now, we don't know that. All I'm saying is, let's disclose all of that. Let an independent team, not McKinsey, they are the guilty part. An independent team on the South African team must decide how much is stolen, since when, apply interest rate, apply penalty, and then put a reparation figure. They must pay that, not what they choose to pay.
Yeah. Doc, then let's go back to what came out of the Zondo Commission through a witness there called Mosilo Motepo, a former executive at Regiment's Capital and Trillion Capital. And let's talk about the culpability of the previous administration. Which one am I talking about? Well, the Zuma administration, let's be clear. She tells the commission that she knew through a colleague of hers about a month before it happened that the former finance minister, Nhlanhla Nene, would be removed and a more pliable candidate would be put in place. If her testimony checks out, what should our thoughts be on the Zuma administration? And who did that information come through?
I think this is not the first time that we've seen. We've seen people knowing way before Brian Molefe was going to move from Transnet to Eskom. The Gupta network knew it. So that is no longer in doubt. More than a few people have corroborated it. The issue is who should pay which part of the reparation. McKinsey's and the KPMG's and Bain and Co., they have on the corporate side culpability and they need to pay. At the same time, there are individuals, both at the political as well as at the technical. You have the chairman of these boards. You have directors of Eskom and Transnet and SAA and Denel and so on. All of them, they belong into different parts and we cannot lump them together. Yes, McKinsey did not do it on its own. Yes, KPMG did not do it on its own, but they lend their brand to these ministers and to these so-called executives who became part of the network of extraction and theft of public funds in South Africa. We need to deal with each category differently.
I'm going to ask you, Doc, to stay exactly where you are, because when we return, we need to drill deeper as to consequence management. Who should take responsibility for what has happened? You're watching Newsfeed, the weekend edition. Very good afternoon to you. If you're just joining us, I am in conversation with Dr. Iraj Abedian, and we're talking about the issues, the testimony, quite dramatic, that came out of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry this week, and it was the testimony of Mosilo Motepu, this former executive at Regiment's Capital and Trillion, someone that I don't know what your description of her would be, Dr. Abedian, but sounds as though this is someone who is a whistleblower, who has information and has even decried the manner in which whistleblowers are treated in our country. She actually asked for the laws around this to be changed so that they favor them. As she describes her life, that's been turned upside down. But we're still on the question of accountability. If Ms. Motepu, as she puts it, she knew a month before that Minister Nhlanhla Nene would be fired and that the much talked about nuclear deal would be one of those that would be seen as key by your Gupta-linked companies, Regiments and Trillion. If that is the case, Doc, can the former president escape culpability here? And it's important that we talk names deliberately, is it not?
Colin, I think there are two dimensions to this theft that has happened called state capture. We give it a diplomatic name over the past decade or so. One is the legal side of it. One is the political and social side of it. It's not by accident that South Africa is now downgraded to junker status. It's not by accident that Eskom is broke. It's not somebody's mismanagement that Denel is broke or SAA is beyond broke. And thousands of jobs are at risk and many thousands of jobs already lost. So these are not accidents. These are not mismanagements. These are well-managed, well-orchestrated plan of national theft of resources, public resources particularly, orchestrated by a group, global capital, global corporates. We mentioned some of them, there's more. A cabal inside in the name of management and CFOs and CEOs and chairpersons of the boards and independent directors, plus political cover, which comes from the heart of the cabinet. Now, these are not any longer speculations. These are facts, corroborated right, left, and center. Now, the question is, how do we deal with accountability? Accountability has got a legal dimension and it's got a political dimension. Both accountabilities are important. We need to learn big lessons. There are clearly big gaping holes in our political accountability as well as in corporate governance and legal accountability. We cannot have a situation where Iraj Singh, Marcus Jooste, and all the people whose name we know, having stolen and have enabled billions of theft, they're still living the high life and they are not taken into account. Whereas if I walk into a shop and steal a loaf of bread, the next minute I'm at the police station. There is something wrong here. You got to deal with it and do it quickly because people are suffering. The poor are suffering in part because these massive amounts are stolen and the government is now, instead of dealing with it, they are fighting as to how they should deal with the accountability.
You know, you talk about political accountability, and that's something that we have consistently sort of been focusing on. And I think leaving corporate accountability by the wayside. If, for example, I look at what Motepu tells the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, she says, the chairs of SOEs would come to our offices and it is courtesy when you go to the client's offices. It felt like Salim Essa and Eric Wood were more in control than the client, which is government. It is like the client did what the service provider told them. Why in the world would only Dudumieni be the one that is declared a delinquent director when we know the chairpersons of these SOEs that clearly frequented these overnight businesses that were set up? Regiment's Capital, we're told that it was set up just days before that all-important reshuffle that would see Nhlanhla Nene booted out.
Absolutely. And not only all these directors should be brought into books and in my view, declared delinquent. Also, we have people who were in the same network and the same mafia, so to speak. They're still assuming political office. They are sitting as we speak. They are not declared as delinquent politicians. They call themselves leaders. They're still getting paid by your and my tax, and they feel nothing wrong. So we need to deal with this as a spectrum. Directors are easy, but we need to revisit the norms of assuming public office, the consequences that comes with it, and there mustn't be a political solution. There is a moral, ethical solution. We got to get political morality back to the South African political economy so that we stop this orchestrated theft of public funds at the expense of the poor and the working class.
You raise a very important point there when you say there shouldn't be a political solution found. The ANC at the moment, I would argue it is stuck with that very problem of a political solution. It has, you've got to tell me whether this governing party is going to really convince the public of South Africa that it is taking this issue seriously, because it is as a result of some of its deployees in government that we find ourselves in the position we're in.
Exactly. And the sad part of it is that with the exception of themselves, nobody else is fooled. When I travel around the country, right across the working group, educated, uneducated, everybody knows what's going on. It's only those who are compromised. They talk to each other. If they come out and listen to the working class, if they look to the students, if they look at even high school kids, they can write essays about their lack of political morality. But they talk as if it's a sophisticated issue. They point at each other. If they are all guilty, they must get out of the room and let somebody who is not guilty, who has not been part of it, take the leadership and clean the slate, because the cost of dilly-dallying and looking for an acceptable political solution is massive on the poor. It sets us back decades, and we don't have the luxury of that.
Final question, Doc. Implications for the rule of law in our country, South Africa, if those who are responsible for this mess are allowed to walk free as a result of a political solution being found, as a result of what people like, for example, the person who speaks for the MKMVA, Carl Niehaus, says is a possibility of a civil war breaking out in the country simply because people are being hauled before important commissions of inquiry in order to account for what has allegedly happened under their watch?
I think if the rule of law is not upheld and is not seen to be upheld, we can forget about sustained investment. We can forget about sustained growth and poverty alleviation. This is the threat of the ignorant, who is completely ignorant of the consequences, that when the rule of law and property rights are not upheld, forget about people committing investment. And by people, I mean local and international. If we don't do that, if we do not uphold the law and to be seen to be upholding the law, rest assured, local capital will begin to fly away. Local skills, black and white, male and female, they are going to desert the destination because that's not where you feel secure, that your investment, be it financial investment or human investment, the skills investment, is protected. So we need to be very serious about this. And again, it's not just a bunch of politicians having clever jabs at each other. It's about the real life of real people and their future and their prosperity or otherwise. We need to become very, very serious. And that is where I suggest political morality must come back to the debate and not politicking and conniving and infighting.
Dr. Iraj Abedian, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for your insights and for making yourself available this afternoon.